Good evening. So your New Year's resolution is to attend every meetup this year? We like it. Tonight we have something nice for you in store. For the people that are new to CocoaHeadsNL, we are a monthly meetup group for Apple developers. We are part of the International CocoaHeads and talk about anything Apple related. First of all, we'd like to thank our regular sponsors. They make it possible for us to host our meetups and to record and stream them as well. Yes, one of our new sponsors is called Stream. If you'd like to help us host these meetups yourself, you can do so by getting some swag from CocoaHeadsNL/shop. Hot chocolate mugs and warm winter sweaters are just what you'll need right now. Today, we will be giving away 2 JetBrains licenses for any of their products, which will be valid for a full year. Has yours expired yet? You can enter the raffle by simply entering the Meetups channel on the CocoaHeadsNL Slack at cocoaheadsnl.slack.com. If you don't have access to that yet, you can use this invite link. Tonight, Jeroen Bakker is live, and he's going to tell us about AppClips and how they can evolve your app's architecture to the next level. We hope you'll enjoy his talk. The CocoaHeadsNL team is looking for people that like to do a talk at an upcoming meetup. So did you implement a nice new feature in one of your apps, or did you learn a new framework or a set of APIs that is worth talking about? Come do an online talk about it at a CocoaHeadsNL meetup. It doesn't matter if you don't have any experience. Most people that do a talk at the CocoaHeadsNL meetups have never given a talk in front of an audience. We are here to help you. All talks will be recorded and streamed live, unless you don't want to. So you will get a free video of your talk as a bonus. This has helped many of our previous speakers to be accepted as a conference speaker. You can contact any of the CocoaHeadsNL team members and share your ideas for a talk, either for an in-person meetup or for an online meetup. You can contact Jeroen Leenaerts, Bart Hofman, Marco Miltenburg, or me, Jolanda Arends. For updates on our next month's meetup, keep an eye on our meetup page and our social media channels. If you don't want to miss any of our videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's the easiest way to see every video that we publish. But we also have our own tvOS app, where we will publish every video. I now hand it over to Jeroen. Have fun, guys!
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to my presentation. I'm going to be talking about how AppClips can evolve your architecture to the next level. First, I will introduce myself. Pleased to meet you. My name is Jeroen Bakker. I'm an iOS developer at Triple. I've been working for them for the past 7 years almost. And currently, Triple is an agency, and thanks to that, I've been working on several apps, including Borsato, Videoland, streamingdienst, RTL XL, Vodafone, Ziggo, Film 1, Sport 1, Ziggo Sport Totaal, iBoot, Rijgersdaal, and currently I'm working on Citizen M. And as you heard, there's a lot of apps going on. But for the last 2 years, I've been working on Citizen M, and Citizen M is a hotel branch app. And with it, you can book your hotel room. You can also pay for it. You can, with your phone, check in using your key card. You can open the doors with it. You can control your room with it. So, for example, the temperature, the room lights, the dims. You can even control what colors they are. That's a really unique app that really controls the hardware of it. And we had the unique opportunity to create an app clip of it. And I'm going to talk to you about how the app clip, how you can make one, what are the tips and tricks you can have of it, and also what I've occurred and how I can help you with that. But first of all, what exactly is an app clip? Well, an app clip is a very fast, lightweight, specific small app which only highlight a specific flow from your app. So, for example, when you're ordering a takeout from a restaurant, a user will scan a QR code or tap something with an NFC, a small pop-up will immediately open up because it's a very small app. It will download immediately, and the user can enter the flow only doing one specific thing. For example, just ordering, or just rent a scooter, or just pay for a gas station. And they will be able to start your experience within seconds, and then at the end of your app clip, you can promote your main app. So this is basically a very great way to introduce new customers to an app clip. Because if your users already have an app clip is not supposed for them. You can only have an app clip if you don't have an app installed. But first, now that we know what an app clip is, how can we make one? Well, of course, we're first gonna just start in Xcode. And just like everything is a target. So we just click new target, we'll select app clip, and then we'll enter our, like we make a provisioning profile and the certificate. Do note, AppClip is not allowed for enterprise accounts. So you must do this on the account where you're gonna release on it. So if you have an enterprise account, like for example, as an agency, we have an enterprise account a lot, but for this, it needs to be on the customer's Apple account because you're not allowed to have an AppClip. Apple just disallow it, you cannot use it, you cannot make provisioning profile, so you're stuck there. And whenever you click on a new target, you can choose in here, you can see on the right side your name for it. In this example, I'll call it app clip. You can choose the interface, if it's either a Swift UI or storyboard. But because it's iOS 14 plus, let's just try Swift UI because that's awesome. Nobody wants to use storyboards. You can even use core data. That's very nice. And include test if you want. Then you just select your project and on which app target it should be. Do note, there can only be one app clip per app. So you can have multiple targets, but you can only submit one. And then when you select Swift UI, you will see a small code example. In here, it's very tiny, very short. You don't have the app delegate, you don't have the scene delegate, you just have your main interface and this content view with Hello World on it, the famous Hello World we all love. Okay, now that we've made a new target, how do we launch it? Well, there are several ways for your users to launch an app clip, and first are by app clip codes. And an app clip code is what you can see on the right side. One of them is integrated with an NFC chip, and the other one isn't. That's just a QR code. Apple made these specific to help identify customers quickly. Oh, hey, this is an app clip image. Let me pick my phone and tap on it. You don't have to use an app clip code, of course. You can just use your own NFC tag. And it even works when your phone is locked. So when you pick up your phone, you just tap it on the NFC spot. It will also launch your app clip. You can also use QR codes made by yourself. They can either be opened by the QR code scanner app or just your camera app. It can also be launched from your Safari Smart App Banner, though if you use Safari, you cannot add a parameters to the URL. And it can also be triggered by messages, but only if the receiver is in your contacts. So it's very small addition. So you would probably use this feature whenever you want to share, when you have a shared experience in your app clip. So for example, you have your food and beverages, you want to share your favorite food. In this way, you can try to have more customers going on your app clip because the customer will send them to their friends. It will also work on maps. You can also specify an app clip to be determined on a location, and then Apple Maps will show it as an option to launch your app clip instead. And as I said, it can be targeted on a specific location. It, however, does not work when you click on a universal link. When you do, it just opens the normal app because it won't launch an app clip. I got a question from Axel, and he said, what happens with the core data storage when the app clip is gone? If you mean by gone when you delete it or like after 30 days, then the storage will be deleted. But if the user updated the app to the main app, it will be merged into it. So your main app can access the same data that has been mutated by the AppClip. You can also use that with key groups. I will talk about that later. I got another question from Yolanda. Can you not use special unique deep links specifically for your AppClip? You can, but I will talk about that later. But you cannot launch it when you click on it, like on a website or on a Slack message, like you usually do. It has to be specific. These AppClip codes and CTEX QR codes, they can have special links, but it cannot be triggered whenever a user clicks something somewhere on a website, for example. Then the trigger won't happen. On Google, it's called Instant Apps. There it does, but Apple decided not to do that. I suppose it works because every time you click on a link, of course, it has to validate if there's an app clip contained to it. And that's a lot of work to do, of course. So maybe in the future they will allow it, but currently we're stuck with these options. In terms of code for the launching, we have two ways, a default one and an advanced one. A default one is nothing else than just opening your app clip with no parameters. And you can configure this when you just visit your App Store Connect page. You see your what's new, you see your screenshots, and then you also see an app clip portion. And there you can only specify three things. It's an header image. It must be an image, cannot be a GIF, can also not be a video, and a subtitle and an action. An action can only be open, view, or order. We also have advanced, but I'll be talking about that after. And whenever I make like a QR code of a URL, the user, whenever they scan it, will see a small pop-up in below. They changed it in iOS 15. I don't know why. It's horrible. Now I have to click on it specifically to launch it. Prior iOS 15, it will just launch immediately, but now I have to click on hotel menu or on the right bottom icon. Whenever I click on it, then on your app, you will see an app clip launch immediately on top of your camera view, which the image you provided, the name of your app clip and the subtitle. And you can open it, and underneath it, your main app will also be immediately promoted. So the user can also decide to just skip it and just open your app immediately. Though when they do, the deep link, of course, won't be triggered again because they will just be sent to the App Store. But the more interesting part are the advanced opening launches. In here, you can create specific URLs that can also contain parameters. So you only specify the base URL, and everything that is appended as parameters after it, you can extract in your code, read it out, and use it accordingly. You can also make it location-based, and you can even confirm if the user is at a specific location. So it's very useful. For example, in the CitizenM case that we have, we want customers to be able to order at the canteen there. But for that, we have to confirm the user's location. So this is a perfect example to use that location-based API. But before you do it, of course, you have to register your domain. And how to do that is just as before. On the left side, we have the app links, app details, associated app file configuration that we already have on our server. And the only thing you have to add is a new key object called AppClips. And there you specify your AppClip bundle. And on the right side, you can have your domain URL status. And there you can verify if Apple sees that your app clip is located on these specific domains. And on this example, I have one on app.citizenm.com and one on link.citizenm.com. Do note, every URL you make should also work on your main app, because customers can also still scan your advanced QR code while having the main app installed, and then it should still, preferably open the exact same flow as you used to have in an app clip. So to keep in mind that it will also work for your main app. And how you make an advanced clip on App Store? Well, it's very convenient. Apple made a great UI for it for once. On the left side, you can just click Add. You see an overview of all your configurable AppClip experience with the URL it's in and on whatever place it is, and the status. In the screenshot, I didn't screenshot the status, but the status is always accepted. It never changes for some reason. I don't know why they introduce a status, but it's just always there. So don't be concerned whenever you don't see any status changes. You just add it, and then after a while, it will start working on your main app. So we'll be clicking on Add, and here you see a nice overview of Apple explaining how you can launch it with Safari, with Maps, and a CTEC, etc., etc. And we can first specify our URL. So I'm just going to quickly go to the next screen because this is all a little bit straightforward. You can read it in your time. You can even enter the AppClip experience URL. And as I said before, you will have to register your domain first, or else Apple will not allow you to continue. And as you can see in here, it's a very nice UI. It will immediately validate if the given URL that you've provided is one of the associated domains you have configured in your info.playlist. If you didn't, then it will just say, as in this example, it will just disallow to be used. And the weird part is, for some reason, you can click on different AppClip bundle IDs. That gives a suggestion that you can upload multiple AppClips, but you can't. Unfortunately, you can only choose one. You might want to, it could be that you renamed your AppClip bundle ID, or maybe that's why they added it this way, but you can only have one AppClip live anyway, so I don't know why they introduced a drop-down. Maybe for the future they want to allow you to have multiple AppClips, but currently it's still one, unfortunate. And then you can customize your AppClip card. You can upload a header, display the title, subtitle. You can even add different languages. So for example, in this case, I've added French. So it's a very nice UI which you can customize. And you can even, like when you have an overview, you can even switch around in the preview to see, okay, how does it look in French? Oh, how does it look in English? It's a very unique that they did it this way. I really liked it, and this is how the customer will experience your AppClip. So for every new advanced AppClip URL you're making, you can have an header image. As you can see here, I've made one specific for, if you look at the URL for AMS, that's Amsterdam Schiphol. I could make a generic one using parameters, but then I couldn't put it on a location specific. So I had to, for every single hotel CitizenM, I had to make an AppClip card with exactly the same information, and that's horrible, there's no duplicate, unfortunately. Just to specify on this location, it should open this AppClip. On this location, it should open this AppClip. On this location, etc., etc., etc. Just for the extra, customers that might happen to go on Google Maps or for Apple Maps. So that's a little bit unfortunate. But if you don't have a location base, you can just make one URL with a parameter in it. Okay, but now that we've now made what an AppClip is, how we make one, how we could launch it, but how does it look in code? Well, in code, you will get a NS user activity. You should also keep in mind that a user can scan the QR code again while they're already busy in the flow. And so like the AppClip can still be in the background, it can be killed, it can be restarted, it can be scanned again. So you have to keep in mind all of those activities. And of course, decide, are you going to make it in SwiftUI or not? Well, for this use case, and what we did as well, we started with SwiftUI because we were excited, new things were coming up, and we're like, yeah, let's do it in SwiftUI. I will talk about the consequences later. But in SwiftUI, it will look like this. This is your main introduction. You shouldn't just pop everything here, of course, but for the purpose of the example, I made it simple and just put it in one file. But basically, you'll have to call the onContinue user activity for type browsing web. and handle the function. And I put it in a start activity where I first check if the activity type is exactly from type browser and web. Currently there are none others, but it's just a validation. I'm going to check the incoming URL and get the components out of it. If nothing is found, I can just should handle an error, or else the user will be stuck in an infinite splash screen. We don't want that either. And when everything matches, I will just validate the URL components and open a flow that I want to do. But speaking of flows, that's the hard part. You should really think what kind of flows do I have? Which flow do I want to promote? And what are basically the capabilities for this flow? And are there any limitations by the AppClip provided? Like, can I introduce every flow that I have, or do I have to mutate them a little bit? Well, there are some limitations, and it's a big list, so I'll go smart one by one. But basically, you cannot use the assets library. You can use the assets catalog, but not the library. Background tasks are not allowed, so whenever the user just moves your app to the background, you're done. You cannot call a background activity. CallKit is not allowed, CareKit is not allowed, CloudKit is not allowed, the contexts are not allowed to read, CoreMotion is not allowed, EventKit, file provider, HealthKit. Do note for file provider, you can access documents that are stored, but not with file provider. So you can do with file manager, but not with file provider. And those are still contained when you download the main app. Well, HomeKit is not allowed. You cannot allow video playback in it. Messages, you cannot read messages from it. You cannot use PhotoKit, ResearchKit, SensorKit, and Speech. These are all the UI frameworks that are not allowed. And there's some more. You cannot use the ad network, is not available. The app tracking transparency will always return nil because it's not allowed to read. Continuous location access is not allowed. You can confirm, however, on what location they are, but you cannot track them continuously. You cannot subtract data from the calendar app or the fitness app, from the photos app, etc. You cannot use Face ID, but weird enough, you can use Touch ID, so that's a little bit weird. It would be interesting to use Touch ID on your new iPhone because, well, we all use ID. You cannot also use maintain Bluetooth connection. You can't use custom URL schemes, but you also can. And with that, I mean, you can use it for authentication, but nothing else. So, for example, we had a Adyen SDK that does payments for us, and it usually opens your banking app, and usually the banking app redirects back to your main app whenever you completed or confirmed a payment. Though this was not possible in AppClips, unfortunately, so we could not add custom payment methods in there. We could only do Apple Pay. So hopefully they will update that in the future. But for authentication, you can use custom URL schemes. And of course, they still enforce you to use Apple Sign-in as well. And there is one limitation, your app can only be 10 megabytes. Well, I don't know about you, if you ever check your main app once in a while, how big it currently is, but the app keeps increasing, and you'll be surprised how quickly you get to the 10 megabytes. But there are some tricks for it, and I will talk about that later. Let's talk about the capabilities. What is specifically possible, and specifically with the capabilities that we always enter in Xcode. Well, we have push notifications, but only, and I hope I pronounced it right, ephemeral user notifications, and that means it's only valid for 24 hours. So whenever your app is launched, using the AppClip card, you can send a notification to the user within 24 hours. Afterwards, it won't be possible anymore. And you can ask for location. I will show you how it looks like that, because the user can still disable these capabilities. So you have to keep in mind in your code that you also let this use case in your app so that you can handle failures with it. And on the right side, you see some additional capabilities that can be added, and that's the app test, app groups. And AppGroups is used to share your data between your main app and your AppClip app. So whenever you add something to the keychain or user defaults, you can also fetch it from your main app once the user downloaded your main app, which is quite useful. For example, if they did a flow, want to register using Apple, they will download your main app and immediately be signed in, so they can continue the whole flow. For example, for the CitizenM app, you want to have you checked in using the AppClip, and when you download the main app, you'll be immediately already logged in, checked in, and you can use the room controls immediately, because the room controls is another feature that's still not part of the AppClip. Well, there are some others, the associate domains, of course, but that's almost required if you want to use advanced URL schemes. The hotspot, multipad, NFC tag reading, which is awesome because we're using like these nice cards for CitizenM, and with this we can read the card and enable access to your hotel room. But it's also great for passport scanning because we also use that. So with it, we can NFC tag your passport and we can confirm that you are the owner of that passport. And how would it look like to the user? Well, it's very tiny, as you can see in the red marker. It says CitizenM wants to confirm that you're in the right region. And as a user, you can click on turn off. It's in Dutch now, so please keep in mind. It's a very small thing, and I think most users will not see it. But when they do see this and disable it, you have to handle the disable state, of course. In another use case, we'll first check your location, and if that's not possible, we're gonna try to check your Wi-Fi SSID name to hope that you're near, and also just don't allow you to order. Okay, but let's talk about a flow. And in this flow, I've talked about adding food, of course. So we're just gonna use this flow because that's an easy flow to start with. And basically it means a user will scan a QR code at a table, it will view the menu, it will add stuff to this basket, pay for it, and then waiting for the order to be ready. Okay, and this flow we already have in our main app, but of course we'll have like a login first, they can select from which hotel they want to order, and we have an order history and all that stuff, but in this use case we just want to order and go. So how do we start? Well, first we're going to see, well, are we going to rewrite our stuff now because we'll have to migrate our flows? Are we just going to completely copy everything and just make it Swift UI, or are we going to reuse the same UI that we already have? Which it makes more sense because every change that we do in the main app should also reflect in the AppClip. And if we do share code, well, how much can we share? And I recommend that you add an AppClip flag, like a Swift flag, so you can exclude or include some things that shouldn't be there or should be there. And well, we've used dependency injection in our app, luckily, and that made it quite well, a lot more easier to implement an AppClip with different dependencies in it. I'll talk about that later. For example, to share code, we just go to a file, and on the right side you see our targets. Like we have an app, the AppClip, a widget, test, UI test, and we have a architecture where we have like a split in domain logic, presentation logic, and data logic. In this case, I wanted to share something that was in data, and I just click on the file, and that way, my code was shared. But of course, as you know, when you click one thing, it will reduce a lot of errors. To add an AppClip flag, you just go to your build settings, go to Swift Compiler Custom Flags in your AppClip, so not in your main app, but your AppClip target. And underneath you see a specific example where I'll check my location. And for the AppClip, I can only check if it's in region. But on the main app, I can of course get the current location. I can get like way more information. I keep getting updates. So there's different code example in here. And in this way, with the Swift compiler flag, you can distinguish both, but still keep the same logic in place. And of course, because of this, there was also an interesting case with dependency injection. We used to have Sunject, and with it, we had, like as you can see here, now I've done if it's not AppClip, because on the main app, I'm also checking if you're in house, but if you have a room assigned on you. But on the AppClip, we don't know that information. That's not required. That's not allowed because you're not logged in. So I have to exclude that from the AppClip. So that's why only the underneath three workers in this case are only available for the AppClip, and the top three are available for the main app, including the three below. But because of this, we had two initializations had to be written, and this was horrible because whenever a change comes in, you have to change a lot of things. You have to do an init again. During AppClip development, you notice your AppClip errors quite easy, but then you have to build your main app, and then it gets messy, and then get another errors because you forgot to put an extra init in there. So we changed our dependency injection manager from inject to resolver, and with that we could remove this line of code, so this entire junk with the definitions and the initializing, to just using this with the @injected mark. It's a super convenient method, and with this we could remove the initialization, and it will still be injectable. So this was already a good challenge for our code base, that we migrated away from an old school dependency injection and get to resolver. Resolver was also just one file, very lightweight method, and also using the latest Swift features, which was nice because Synject was a little bit outdated, and it's struct safe. So in this way, we can add new dependencies very quickly. But let's look again at the location worker, right? On the app, we have these location manager delegates. With an AppClip, we just only have the region. And how do we even how can we even confirm our location? Well, when you look at the NS user activity, there is a payload called AppClip activation payload. And with it, there's a method called confirm acquired to determine if you're on a location. And when you look at the documentation, it looks like this. It checks whether an AppClip invocation happened at an expected physical location. And there are some parameters in there, a region, and you get a completion handler back, a bool, or an error. And yes, for all the async Swift fans out there is also an async function available for this. But Apple already provided that. So you can either use this or the async await one. And how would the callback look like? Well, to check if you're in a location, in here I pass along my hotel object. And because it's a user activity which only happens on launch, I made a storage out of it, so I can fetch it whenever I need it, because I only had to check your location on a later step. And I didn't want to pass along the user activity from scratch to all the way to the end, so I just made a storage of it, like this user activity, so I could always fetch it later to confirm your location. And I will make a region from an hotel object. And if you look at below, you see I need a location coordinates and radius. And the radius that is in my hotel object is in kilometers, so I just have to convert it to meters. And with it, I could create a circular region. And with that, I could ask the payload, am I in this region? And then the app will just return false or true. And that's the only information you can get from a location using an AppClip. So you can literally only validate is the user here. So nobody made like a screenshot of your QR code and skimmed it at home, but they are physically, with their device at least, at the region you want them to be. And as you saw this code before, I'll have here two different location workers, one for AppClip and one for the main app. They're called the same, they're using the same protocol, but the fun part is this is a also a challenge. You have to determine if the same implementation, if you wanted to be shared. Because in this case, they're so different, I didn't want one protocol to be defined than both, because then you will have weird data that's in both places. So I decided to create two different location workers. One of them is purely for the main app, using a lot of parameters in there. And the second one underneath below is just for the AppClip, because I just wanted to know if it's in a region. So in here, I decided not to share my code, but made a new implementation, registered just as the same name. So everywhere where I use my location worker, I didn't have to update. I just only had to update the implementation of it, which is very nice with dependency injection. Also, one thing you did note, whenever you want to enable a file to be also in your AppClip, you will probably see what you see on the right side. Oh, I cannot find this, I cannot find this class, I cannot find this class, I cannot find this class, I cannot find this class. So I would say, take your time with it, and in here you will immediately notice your architecture decisions you've made, because in here we have a button which pretty much did almost everything, but that was of course not a very good decision to have like a God button. Because in here we had to include so much dependencies that just to add a button, we had to include 100 files and 3 dependencies. That was horrible. So in that way, it was a great reminder that, oh, hey, we fucked up here with our button. You should think more like how SwiftUI does their views. You have a button. If you want a rounded button, you create a new view, rounded button. If you want a button with a click on it and it's also rounded, well, you just continue on, continue on, continue on, continue on. You want to make small pieces, so it's much more easy to share with another target. We didn't have this problem in the main app, but thanks to the AppClip, you come across these decisions. And you should also always think about using third-party libraries. They can add quite a lot with your size limit. So if it can be done native, do it native. For example, like networking, you can include Moya or Lambafire in it and do fancy networking, or you can just use eRaw session and then get it for free from Apple, because with iOS 14 and 15, the API is so advanced, you can just write it native instead. And there's also a nice challenge for us, because in our use case, we have like an app target, as you saw, a presentation target, domain target, and a data target. And in presentation, it implements domain, and data implements domain. So there's like a bridge between presentation and data. And what we've done is we've did every UI in presentation, every worker in domain, so the only protocols are in there, and models. And in data are all our entity models and all our services, so like the implementation of these workers. It was a great way to separate concern and to use dependency injection this way, but thanks to the AppClip, it was kind of, thrown in your face, because we couldn't just click on, oh, I want to include all my domain logic in there, because that was way too much, or include all my data logic in there. So this also made us reconsider to maybe make a framework per flow instead of using this kind of separation. And in that way, you can just include your flow quite easily. Well, that's the thing that theoretically you can add your flow quite easily to your AppClip. Instead of to validate it, because it's quite a hassle to update in your main app, because we already had a lot of files in there. So we just went one by one. I want to include this, I want to include this, I want to include this. And make sure to use our Swift flag to exclude things, to include things. And now we're busy trying to refactor our architecture code to reduce all the if-else statements with the Swift flag. Okay, once you've did all the code example and moved your flow in your AppClip, at the end of it, you can promote your main app just using a SK overlay. It's very straightforward. You pick your scene, You make a app configuration, you specify the position you're in, and you present it. And this is what you want to do when you're done with a flow. So, for example, I ordered, hey, success, and underneath I want to promote my app. Of course, whenever your app clip launches, there will be a presentation on top, which is already promoting your app. But this way you can do it at the end as well. You can also, of course, always make your own button or click to action to the App Store, of course. This is the native one. Okay, but now that we've written our app clip, we've made the flow, we've pushed our head against the wall for several hours because all the errors that we had in Xcode, like, oh, I need to include this, I need to include this. So take your time with it. How can you test it? Well, of course, just run Command R. But with that, you will just launch it immediately without the AppClip card. And of course, sometimes you will also want to test specific invocations with the advanced URLs you've made. And you can do that using the _xc AppClip URL. And you can put it in your environment variable. There are also some developer settings you can do. I will talk to that soon in TestFlight and in the App Store. And because the latest tests you can do, like you can do a lot of in TestFlight, but at the official test, you have to wait until your app is in the App Store to actually validate production. And that's kind of, awful, but also, well, that's how Apple works. But the XE AppClip URL environment variable is just, you go to environment variable in your scheme, you add a URL fit. In this example, I've added several, but I only enabled one, so I can switch around testing with it. And in here you can see I have link.citizenm.com with some gibberish and then some parameters called hotel and which outlet. And the link underneath is when I wanted to use a checking flow. So in this way you can really quickly test your code with it. And to test with developer settings, you go to your settings, scroll all the way down to developer. If you do not see developer, and usually your product owner won't see it, and they probably want to test it as well, ask if they have a Mac and Xcode installed. If they don't, maybe you want to visit them. Put your iPhone, put your cable onto your Mac, open Xcode, and then the option will be available on your phone. I do recommend that you want your product owner to do this because else you can never test the QR code experience before going to production. And there's a great feature called Clear Experience Cache. I marked it because AppClips are cached hard, and I don't know the exact time for it. We had some issues in the past with it, but make sure, whenever you're testing it, that your product owner have this option available, because whenever you made a mistake and you fixed it during TestFlight, whenever they just want to scan it again, they will still keep having that issue because their cache is not cleared yet. So with this option, they can clear their experience AppClips cache. It's a very annoying cache. When you click on Add, you can see a list of your made experiences, and you can make a new one. You can add the URL you want with it, the same way that you've added environment variables. You can specify which bundle ID, because of course you can have multiple AppClips installed on your test device. And you can, in this example, I used a picture from my photo library and added some custom text in it. Everything is locally, so it's not triggered that you've entered anything from the App Store. So make sure you see that distinguished. This is purely local. And before you, of course, scan your QR code, make sure you at least installed the AppClip using TestFlight at least once, or you run your code on your test device at least once. Else it won't do anything. It will just open the browser or your main app if it's installed. And also make sure if you have multiple app installs of your app, this link will probably also handle your acceptance and production bundle ID, so make sure you delete everything before you're going to start testing AppClips, so you have a little bit of fresh install on your phone. And how we use it in TestFlight? Well, on App Store Connect, you can add URLs in it, And whenever you click on your AppClip, it will automatically deinstall the main app. So for user experience, this is a little bit more friendly because you don't have to do that yourself. And to do that is you just go to your specific iOS build and you add a AppClip invocation. It's a new configuration that's there during test information. And when you click on an AppClip invocation, it's a very small frame with just a title and the URL you want to open. And then you can see the list here, and then whenever your user will open TestFlight, you'll see a new section called AppClips with the title I provided, and they click on Test. And when they click on Test, it will deinstall the main app, and it will open the AppClip with the given URL. Do note, every AppClip invocation that you've made in here will only persist on your app version. So in this case, on 1.37.0. So whenever I make a new upload with the same version but a different baud number, my invocation will stay there. If I upload a new one, 1.38.0, it will all be gone, and I have to re-add all those invocations again if I want to test it. I've already had contact with Apple with it during their Q&A section, during DubDub and afterwards several times, and it's intended this way, unfortunately. So it's a lot of maintaining to do if you put every app release you want to test your AppClips. But do keep in mind while testing, cache is your enemy. We had a use case where our framework that we use called AppsFlyer enforced us to use a specific bundle ID for our AppClips that was not mutatable, and we before we even started with this framework, because we already had an AppClip live, had a different bundle ID, so we had to migrate. But as because an AppClip is not like released as an app, well, it is released as an app, but you cannot update it as a user. So whenever they scan a QR code, they will just immediately fetch the latest one. And because of the cache, it took a while for Apple to see that we uploaded a new bundle ID, so all of our users that scanned the QR code during our upload of the new one had failures in it. That's a horrible cache. And after some contact with Apple and several emails, I found that just removing your advanced AppClip experience and re-adding them was the best way to reset the cache. Because we tried to enforce the cache reset by Apple, but they were like, no, we don't know how long it takes. Can you help reproduce it, etc., etc. So if you ever come across a cache that your customers have issues with, just delete your advanced AppClip experience, deactivate it, and make a new one. And that way, within 12 to 24 hours, it started to work again. And make sure to add the advanced URLs in advance, because of course it will take 24 hours to me to start up. So if you're just going to release your app store and then make your advanced AppClip experience, it can take a while for it to launch. Okay, now that we've we've made our AppClip, we tested it. Now we're going to upload it to the store. But of course, there is a 10 megabytes limit, and you can have only one AppClip per app. And there are ways that you can check how big your app is before even uploading it, before you get like an annoying message from Apple, because during runtime you never get this message. You only get it when you upload it. You just have to archive your main app, so not the AppClip, but your main app, export it as ad hoc or development, and then select your AppClip. Because when you have an AppClip in an app, you have an extra option after you select development or ad hoc. And then you will enable app thinning and rebuild from bitcode and include every device that there is. And that way you will get this results, an app thinning size report. And in it is a lot of data. Probably my face and cover it, but it doesn't matter. It's a lot of data. You can just all skip it. You can just scroll all the way down just to the latest one called Universal. Fun fact, the universal one is probably never used, but this is the one that Apple uses to determine how big your AppClip is, and it will not look at the compressed size, it will look at the uncompressed size unfortunately. So in this case, it's 9.5 megabytes, so we're just 500 megabytes below the marker. So we're like, oof, just close enough. But like, how can you reduce it? Well, when you open the apps folder, like as you saw here, there's an apps folder. You can unpackage it. You see your EPA, and then you can show the content on it. And the two things that are usually the biggest, and you can reduce size a lot, are assets and frameworks. In the assets, as you can see here on the right side, all my assets together are 547 kilobytes, so it's very small. But my frameworks, well, unfortunately you can't see here, but as you can see, the app was 9.5 megabytes. Just the code alone is 5.1, so you can determine it's like 4.3 megabytes of frameworks. That's quite a lot, almost 50% of the app clip. You can look into it and see, hey, how big is the Resolve framework, for example? Well, in this case, it's luckily only 159 kilobytes. But Lottie, for example, like with the nice animations, was already almost 700 kilobytes, almost 1 megabyte. So then you can determine, okay, do I want to have Lottie, or can I just do a simple animation instead to reduce the app size that way? So a lot of things about like, okay, I'm going to do it native or include a framework. If you have the room, just use a framework if you're used to it for your main app. If not, try to see, okay, which steps can I take to make it native to reduce the size. And for assets, that was a quite fun one. I also talked with Apple engineers like, okay, what are best ways to do this? And they just said, well, on iPad, it will load your app clip as an iPhone app. So the 3 times size is not needed. You can just, like, it's redundant, so you don't have to specify every size. You can also reduce your image size by just using PNG8 or convert it to GPG, or use the just online free program TinyPNG. Like whenever I upload an image in there, it's reduced my images by 80% with a lot of metadata to be removed. Of course, always check the quality afterwards because it doesn't guarantee the same quality. But in our case, it reduced a lot of megabytes from our assets, and in that way, like we first had 4 megabytes of assets, now it's just 500 kilobytes. And every image that's not needed, just lazy load them. And the last thing I want to talk about is the one app clip limitation. You can if you want, you can have multiple flows, but it's still in one app clip. And in our example, we have multiple flows in our app clip. That's why it's so big. And we use that to use different advanced URLs with different parameters. And that way we can, during your app launch, we can say, oh, okay, open flow 1 or open flow B. But keep in mind that because of this, we had to make a generic splash screen. Because the splash screen couldn't be like only food, because we don't know which flow to open yet. I asked some Apple engineers as well what are their thoughts about it, and they said, well, we had a lot of requests from it, so just entered in a feedback request, and they might consider adding more app clips in the future because that's how they work. When they get features, a lot of feature requests, then the priority will be prioritized based on that. So I just submitted a feedback ticket to Apple in the hopes that during the next update it will be allowed to have multiple app clips. And of course, as always, keep the 10 megabytes limit in mind. But after everything, some final thoughts. I think AppClips is very useful to introduce new users. It's also fun as an architecture challenge because code sharing is now very hard to do and to share flows and what is useful, what is not. So it really opened my mind to think more about it, how I'm going to set up my UI, how I'm going to set up my logic in a case that I also want to use it as an app clip. And I recommend, if you want to watch some dub sessions from last year, to watch 12 and 13. That will have some nice tips in it as well. Thank you all for listening. And yes, if you want, we're always hiring. So as iOS developer or any developer, are there any questions? It's a lot of to take in. If you want, you can also, if you have any questions, you can also just Slack me in CocoaHeads. I'm there as Jeroen Bakker, and I'll thank you for listening. See you.